Alright, welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to go into compositional structure again on this video. I covered it in the F's of composition. I know it sounds kind of corny, and I didn't invent that. It just seemed to be that a lot of the different aspects of it started with an F when I was thinking about it, so kind of thought I would do something along those lines to I don't know, maybe make it a little bit more memorable when someone starts approaching their scenes. Okay, so we did everything on, well, we did most of our scenes on cardstock, okay? White cardstock, be it kind of a matte or a glossy. And I did do something a little bit more unconventional, but it's really dynamic, which is photo stamping here, and we used a piece of the vintage paper right here to create a scene. And again, it's just using that compositional structure that I was talking about in these pieces. But let's go into some materials here, surfaces that are, less conventional types of stamping surfaces, meaning that they are largely, I don't know if they're non-porous, but they're a lot less porous than any type of cardstock. Even the photo paper, I just stamped on this with your dye-based inks, okay? It doesn't even require something like, a StazOn or a solvent style of ink to stamp and to dry on this. Photo paper is really great for impressions. It's not always great for certain types of coloring, though. That's why I don't use photo paper too much unless I'm using it with alcohol inks, which are a little bit more surface oriented, and I kind of blend them around with the blender pen of that, that people usually use with alcohol inks. Okay, so that being said, as far as these unconventional stamping surfaces, we're talking about solvent inks or something like your Brilliance pigment ink, okay? The solvent inks are thinner, okay? So when I stamp on those stamp with those on these types of surfaces, I usually get a lighter impression, okay? I've come to use Brilliance inks, and I just think it's a great ink to have in your repertoire, your list of supplies, etc., because it opens up all kinds of different surfaces than other stamps can not only stamp on, but you can blend with it, okay? The solvent inks are really perfect for stamping, but you can't blend with them because they just dry instantly, almost as soon as, you touch the paper with it in release, that's going to be dry in, I don't know, 5-10 seconds or whatever it is. But something like this, which is a unique ink, really opens up the doors. I'm not any type of spokesman for Tsukaneko or anything like that. I don't know them at all, okay? But this ink was developed years ago for being able to use a pigment ink on glossy cardstock, okay? I assume that was it because that's what, the two things that people were stamping on were matte and glossy cardstock, and that was it, okay? I don't know, maybe people were doing envelopes and linens or something like that, but not very much, okay? So I've been using a lot of vellum of late in a few experiments, and I'm really loving it in terms of its ability to be used on the front as well as the back of the paper, okay, or the back of the linen, all right? And I use that for strategic effect to create depth in a scene, okay? So let's do something on this vellum area. There's a lot of different ways you can use this. Being that you can see through it, I did an experiment where I stamped my images on top of the vellum, but then I just mounted it onto, like a photograph of a sky or something like that. So here we're doing photo stamping like this, okay, where you're stamping it directly on top of a photograph, but, with the vellum and its see-through ability, you can take something like this and you can, spray mount it right on top of it. This is a different dimension. I would cut this down to match it, but you can use this for that type of purpose here. It gives it a different look, and it kind of subdues the background photography due to the translucent nature of the material of the surface right here, okay? So this is pretty fun stuff. I would get different dimensions if I really want it to match my quarter page card, 5x7. These are all 4x6s here. Okay, one of the things I did on this one right here, I stamped this out. I got a little smudgy back there. I don't know if it's either on the back or the front of this. But what we'll do is we'll finish this off, and I'll show you how the process of stamping on these types of surfaces is a little bit different than, or can be different than your matte cardstocks, okay, and how you can utilize that to your own strategic benefit here. Okay, so with something like this, I've stamped this. This is the front of this. Now this could be the back of it too, and I could, I could put this Lakeside Cove in the back, and then I can stamp on this in the front. Do you see how this is darker on this side because that's the side I stamped on, but then you're looking through this frosted type of paper, and that looks lighter like that, okay? But let's do this right here. Okay, I mean, this could be a more distant area, which it is because I have this foreground in here. You see this right here? This is foundation right here. It's going to be a Lakeside Cove, okay? Now I could push that back in the distance like that by stamping this on this side in a darker color. I would usually make my background, imagery lighter than my foreground typically. Or I can go like this and stamp this on both on this side, and then we can use this side for our foreground, so the foreground's really, dark, and then this whole area right here is lighter. So, you know what I mean? It's just a little tweak on those kind of compositional strategies that you can use, with your foundation, filler, foreground, and focal points and whatnot. So it's just one extra little thing to think about. I don't think it's a hassle or anything like that. It's not like we're adding in so much, like complications. It just opens up the opportunities for visual depth in your scene in a very easy way. It's like you don't even have to do anything. You just stamp on one side of the card or the other. Okay, so on this one right here, let's just do this on the same side. I don't know. I mean, this isn't really kind of filler. I mean, it could be. It's still kind of the foundation. It's a whole lakeside scene like this, okay? So let's just go ahead and stamp this on this side, and then maybe that's where, well, I'll stamp the foreground on here. Oh my gosh, here's another thing too. As I'm sitting here thinking about this, I could do the double layer of vellum too. I can stamp, position this on another layer of paper or vellum. Or this can be the middle layer. Vellum is its own kind of, monster here. Visual monster, with so much ability that it's really, and it's like, I don't know if it's like playing chess or something like that, where you can think ahead and do all kinds of different moves. But it is certainly interesting in terms of the, the compositional aspects that one can achieve. Okay, so that being said, let's do this right here. Like I said, I had that little smudgy little black back there. But let's stamp this cloud cumulus. You've seen me use this. Shall we do that in like a blue? Yeah, I might still see a little of that smudgy black in there, but let's go ahead. Let's try this right here. I'm still experimenting around with this type of stamping here on the vellum, so with every scene that you see me do, it's an experiment for me too, seeing something for the first time. You might be seeing the video for the first time, but in all probability it's me doing that type of look for the first time as well and not really knowing what to expect. Okay, now this is in a dye-based ink. This is just a dark blue. Now I'm going to stamp this on the other side of my vellum. Okay, so this is kind of your filler right here, okay? You can call this filler, the pines and rocks can be filler too, working around my main image of the Lakeside Cove, but, this is kind of where the filler kind of starts to come into play. All right? So this is what that blue looks like right over the top of that. I think that looks pretty good, but it also looks good kind of a little bit more diffused. Now, we don't have to do this. You can create this type of effect, as you've seen me do, on just single-sided papers, like white paper. I just stamp my, cloud lighter, and that looks like it's farther back in the distance, or I can stamp it in a lighter color to begin with. But if you just want some other type of version of this type of thing like this, it does look different. It has a softer kind of feel because you're looking through the translucency of this paper right here. It's like looking through frosted glass at that impression right there, okay? Look how soft that looks. Okay, now let's do some filler down here. We have some clouds in the sky. And don't worry, this dye-based ink, I find, dries on this, but you can just heat set it too, okay? Okay, now for these reflections down in the water, what I'll do is I've shown how to do sky figures in my other videos. You can watch those, but I think it's called Seamless Skies or something like that. But see that right there? I mean, I think that looks pretty good just on the front there. You know, of course, this is all faded out right here. This could still be, you know, my format here. I could still have this as my front of my scene. And I can stamp darker images on this side, but see that right there? Those reflections down there. And then I'll put some foreground in here too, so, you know, we still have those F's to go, and you can have a focal point in there if you want to, or whatever. Okay, let's see. Now, there's all kinds of different choices. I can do this in dark down here. I can just use, you know, one of the things that I've been using a lot, which are these reeds down here. I can stamp more clouds over here. Let me just fill this in right here a little bit more, okay? Let me see if I still have a little bit of ink left on this stamp. A lot of times you do when you're using the non-porous papers because the ink isn't absorbing into the paper as much as it would, like a cardstock or something like that. So I got a little bit more of an impression right there. And there it is. It's easier to see it over a white background like that. Okay, so that is the cloud on the back. So you see what I mean? In this case, just the filler on a transparent or translucent piece of paper is on the back side. All right. Okay. Images on the front side. Foreground. Foreground, we like to go pretty dark. Oh, what am I doing here? I was doing the. I'm just going for my first open pad here. Yeah, we could stamp this in, you know, dark blue in the foreground, but let's go with the Brilliance Black again. Okay. Remember, this Brilliance Black, I'm not really stamping it on that cloud right there because the cloud is on the back side of the paper. Okay? So, foreground, okay, like so. And let's go for, I think I still have it here. Let's go for a little bit of a focal point here in this canoeist, okay? So this is just a really simple version of a vellum strategy piece, okay? You know, being that we stamped on the back of it. Okay, now what I would do is, with this all stamped out like this, let me heat set this for briefly. Okay, so that is dry. And what you can do is you can, you know, I like using things like colored pencil on here to color and render my forms and things like that, maybe give it a little bit more of a vignette. I don't know, you can put whatever color on those rocks that you want to, etc. Or what you can do is you can mount this onto a piece of, like a white cardstock, something a little bit thicker. I'm seeing if I have some spray mount here in my office. I keep it next to the back door because I just do all my spray mounting outside. But you can spray mount it on something that's firmer, and it'll give you a little bit more. You know, this is just a 50-pound, like, text weight type of paper right here, so it's kind of flimsy to work on. So sometimes you want something a little bit more substantial to do your coloring on. Okay. Oh, here's a couple different spray mounts. I forgot that I had this one. This is the 3M spray mount. Artist adhesive, okay? And what you do is you just spray the backside of this, and then you apply it carefully onto whatever you want to mount it on. And then I also have the 3M 70 Super 77. Oh my gosh. right here. I just noticed I didn't know I had, oh, this one's empty. I have another can. I bought like a 6-pack of these cans one time for a gigantic project I was doing. So anything like this, see, this is a multi-purpose adhesive. This one's an artist adhesive. This one's like all rusted out. I don't know when I got that. If it's still good, I don't know. I'll test it out. But, okay, so that is that, all right? But it's still the same process. It's just a matter of where you want, say, the filler stamps, where you want the foreground stamps, etc. on something like vellum. I'd really recommend giving vellum a shot. A lot of people have used it before. I'm not sure people have done a lot of front and back types of applications of it, though. And I don't know. It's such a dynamic. There's such dynamic potential in that. Okay, now let's do a couple of these scenes that I've already done on these other types of, whatever plain surfaces. Okay. We'll come up with a couple different compositions maybe, but okay, let's start off with this one right here. This one's the Snowy Brook, and a lot of the imagery off of Nature Set number 10. Okay, so let's say we want to do something on like a dark blue cardstock. Foil. All right, this one's the cardstock. This one's the foil. Stamping black imagery over a dark dark surface like this in foil. These types of things just aren't going to show up on here, okay? So I'll show you the process of doing this on this type of surface right here, okay? Dye-based inks on the cardstock, but we need something that's going to dry on foil, right? Your water-based inks stamped onto here, or something like an oil-based pigment ink. That's not going to dry on here. If you're going to use something like this, you'd probably emboss it or something like, use that type of technique if you use that pad. Clear embossing or whatever. We're going back to the brilliance here again, okay? So, let's start off with an image. Our foundation image, okay? Our foundation image it's going to be a chapel, on this winter kind of, snowy creek. All right, so getting this ready to stamp on here. This is not going to show up on this, right? So that's where your Brilliance White comes into play. I don't know of any other white that can be used for this. There might be something out there. I have a StazOn white pigment like this, but that is made more for impressions to stamp on something like that, because I've tried to blend it out, and as soon as something hits it, I hit the cotton to this paper, instant dry. Okay, I can't move it around and blend it at all. All right, now where do I put, some white on this? I call this blocking out, okay? There's no set thing. I mean, we could kind of get the general idea of where all of this different types of imagery is going to go, but I'm just doing more of a general coating of this. Now, I don't want to coat the whole thing, otherwise there's no point in stamping using the foil if we just block everything out with white. But I can see right here, I'll have my chapel right here, and I'll have my creek side down here. So what this looks like as far as an application goes, don't get too particular about it, like, wait, I want to use these trees right here, so how high up are they going to go? That would be too much for me to think about. So on something like this, I'm just doing kind of a general kind of application of this. And where I don't have it, the imagery will appear darker. So be it. That just means that they're in shadows or something like that. Okay, now, if I know my chapel is going to go kind of in this vicinity, I do want it to stand out a little bit more. Okay. Now down here, don't worry about, okay, wait, there's a black area right here in the rock, and there's a white area there. Don't worry, because you're going to stamp that out, and that rock's going to be in black over this, so it's not like you only have to apply this where there's snow, okay? It's not like that at all in terms of your application process of this, I don't want to go too little or something like that, where I stamp it out, and again, it's black against, this darker blue like this. This blue really isn't super dark, it's just that when it's reflecting, anything above it, it's going to look darker, but, it's like this color. right here, okay? That's what's so dynamic about foil. It gives you so many different looks. It's super dynamic because you're incorporating the reflective light um, characteristic of the surface. So different colors and different qualities of any particular foil is just really, really kind of, fun to explore. This is kind of my first, well, I don't know, I would say my first foray, but I think that might have been the more of the Star Dreams because I had a lot of the Star Dream papers, the iridescent papers. But then playing with that, you kind of want to keep pushing and pushing the techniques or whatever, with something that's a little bit less, something that's reflective but less reflective than foil. Then you want to just, have something that's super reflective and just see if the techniques kind of hold, going to kind of a more extreme application of it. Okay, so anyways, that's what that looks like right there. It's not evenly applied, all right? In fact, I think it looks better in the end results when you have things a little bit more irregular, like this, okay? There's my fingerprints on it. You might have nail, kind of, indentations in there. You can blend it out if you want to, but I would say just leave them in there, especially if you haven't done this before and upon your first kind of forays into the process. Test it out and see what those different things look like when you do it. And a lot of times you'll find out these irregularities in your white application blockout process. They don't even show up when you stamp the images over the top of them, so there's no use in trying to get a super even blend. And plus, when it's irregular like this, it just means that there's lighting kind of differences across the surface of your page, which looks good in scenic stamping when you have kind of a variation in light. This might look different. I can never tell when the white's dry because the black you can tell because it looks flatter than what it looks like when it's wet. But with the white, it doesn't change kind of characteristics too much. Okay, but let's see. I don't remember what I was saying about this. Anyway, let's just get started with the impressions on this. Okay. With the black. I'm not going to use this whole stamp here, okay, for our foundation image, but I am going to ink up the whole thing so I can kind of decide as I go along. Oh, let's see. I think I stamped it about this high the previous time. I'll go for roughly about the same. This is hanging off about 3/4 of an inch, and this one's hanging off probably half to 3/4. I think what I was going to say was with the white ink, you might see some variation when you dry it. It might look darker, showing the paper through the surface a little bit more. Okay, now with big stamps like this, when you're stamping it on another type of surface like this, make sure that you have enough ink in your Brilliance inks, okay? This pad of mine was super old, so I had to keep re-inking it. And it seems like I had to keep re-inking it almost every time I used it until it finally achieved kind of super saturated. You don't want to over-ink these things either, where it's real blobby or something like that. Okay. Now I'm also kind of holding this down on the foil to let the ink transfer a little bit longer. Okay. See, I kind of held it there, so the ink is kind of setting up a little bit on the surface of the foil. And also, when you put this white foundation down, it's easier to stamp out the black or the images over this dried up brilliance. It gives the ink something to grab onto a little bit more than just stamping directly onto foil. But you can do that, but just That's just an observation I've had in terms of stamping ease, you might say. Okay, so let's go on with the country chapel. Small stamp. Let me see if I can find that. Where did my stamps go? Here we go. Let me grab a couple of these that we'll be using on here. Okay, so the chapel is still, you know, one of those foundation images. It's kind of dictating what the overall scene is going to be about. The foil really plays a big role in the spirit and subject matter of a piece, you know. It's such a main character where, like a piece of white paper, like cardstock, is more of just like a universal ground. You know, this foil really becomes an integral part of the composition in terms of visuals. I need to clean off the back of this stamp. It's a little bit dry and not clingy as much. Okay, stamping this right over the creek. Okay, but you see how that cabin stands out because I stamped it over white. Now you look at that, it looks like a little bit of a horizon glow in the background where I've gone up into there with the blue, but doesn't that have like there's a different quality to this look here. But see, it's still, you know, we're still doing the same kind of fundamental kind of building principles here. We're building up. Now we're going into our filler imagery, which will be this tree stamp here. Okay, this is the tree cluster small. Okay. Here it is in the wood-mounted version. Okay, and I stamped it roughly about out here. Oh, and we did the masking and used the smaller portion of it right in here. So we'll take this and we'll just mask off a little horizon area right in here. And I'll stamp this tree right in there, a little, kind of the tip, you know, the tip of it, like so. All right. Now let's expedite this whole process. This is about kind of, you know, follow-up for the composition video. I might not put, you know, as much foreground and things like that in this video. I just want you to see kind of how your process of building a scene kind of alters a little bit depending on the surface that you're using. You might have to do some preliminary surface additions, okay? All right, this is the snow texture that we've used in that previous video. Okay, so I have that right down in here. This piece. You can even use the snow texture in the foreground too. Like this. I don't know if you can see it right here. There we go. See this right here? A little texture like that. I'll show you what it looks like right here. That's what that snow texture looks like. Okay? It's real airy and light. Okay. And this is just kind of like, it's almost like photo stamping, you know, in terms of having an established background. So that when you stamp out your imagery on it, you don't really have to do too much more. Now, I have this laid out like this. Now, one of the things that I would typically do, if this was on cardstock, I would, you know, add some shadows using whatever inks I want, dye-based inks or colored pencil or something like that if I was working in colored pencil. But for something like this, what you do is you would use some more of your Brilliance ink, kind of on a piece of cotton or something like that, and add a little bit of shading into these areas. But very little is needed for these pieces, okay? Oh, let me show you something on dark paper too, in terms of your filler. Okay, so we went foundation, filler were those trees in there, okay? Now you can say the foreground can be filler too, but it's you know, a specific filler stamp, okay? It's usually lower on the horizon and closer to you, unless you had like overhanging branches or something like that. Okay, but adding that in like so, there is our foreground to give us, you know, kind of an extended range of depth. And from a compositional standpoint, okay, now I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'm just going to put a couple of these dots in here, but you can call this filler texture as well by just taking a white paint pen. And I'm doing this here because you can do this on any of the foils that I'm working on, especially if, you know, of course, if it's a nighttime scene. Or if it's daytime scene, then you can just go with uh, you know, this as snowfall if it's a winter scene or something like that sort, okay? But anyways, little dots like that, okay, just up in the sky. Now, if I put it over everything, then it would read as snowfall, but see that right in there? I don't know what you would call that, but in terms of you know, a compositional process type of thing, that could be filler for your sky, just as, you know, a moon could be, or clouds in the background. It could be a focal point too, because people are, you know, that get this type of thing, will their eye will go right to those stars up there, especially if you make one kind of a twinkly star. Or you can make my kind of more of a glowing star with a little pigment ink over the top of it. You can see me doing that in different videos. But this is just a foundation. This isn't supposed to be a finished scene. I would add in some other kind of highlights on these rocks, and I would add shadows in here, okay? But just in terms of the compositional structure, the snowy brook here, is that the, I think it's a snowy brook stamped down here, and then my chapel right there. Those two really make the foundational composition of what this scene is about, right? It's a chapel against this little stream here. Then we have our filler stamps of these trees in here, and then our foreground. Okay, so foundation, filler, foreground. And you can call those stars filler too. You know, that's just kind of a media filler as opposed to a stamp. But they're certainly an integral part of the composition. And I would say very, very important. They really stand out, and, you know, people love seeing those little star-like effects. I could let this air dry, but I'm kind of just, you know, piling these up on the side, you know, kind of to finish up later. Okay, now let's do something here. So these are, again, can you kind of see the foundational kind of um, patterns or whatnot, you know, the relationships between all of these different parts of your scenic building. Okay, now let's do something else right here. Let's build on this type of general block out of the background, okay? And just putting, you know, kind of in this morphic style of white pigment ink applications. I don't know how to explain it any other way. Okay, now let's do something like these clouds right here, okay? I mean, it's not going to look like this, like a mackerel type of sky, you know, and that kind of shape in there. But let's do some blocking out with this paper right here. It's an iridescent one. You can do this on, you know, we can do what I'm going to do on this, on the foils too. This one's more of that iridescent style of paper that I was talking about, though. This one's a Star Dream, lapis lazuli, which is one of my favorite colors to work with. Okay, I just ripped this paper towel, but I ripped it a little bit too straight. Sometimes the paper towels have a little, well, that's real straight right there. Okay, I'm going to try to go for a more rounded rip right here. Something like that. Does that look like a cloud? Not really, but... Okay, that looks fine to me. Okay. I need to go back to my paper towel ripping class. I'm joking. Okay, let's lay down some clouds back here. So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of blocking out. But here's my point with something like this. Okay, these clouds in the background here were your foundation. It's the F for foundation, okay? The things are kind of already established in here, right? This scene is really about the clouds in here, okay? And then the foreground is all this, and you can call the focal points the bird and the, the quote stamp here. But sometimes your foundation can just be, it can be media that you've applied. You do some kind of cool oxide background or something like that with, water, kind of a reactive, types of bleaching on it. That could be your foundation, okay? A cool alcohol ink background, an aurora borealis effect or a Braillard background. That's kind of your foundation, and then all you're doing is you're stamping your foreground in front of it. So let's do something in that spirit here, but instead of like an instant background like the antique paper or your photograph of clouds, let's just make it ourselves, okay? And making up these different types of backgrounds in scenic stamping is really fun because almost anything goes. It doesn't have to be realistic either. You can do something wild, and there are different types of things that happen in nature, in the sky, that are super, super dynamic that, I don't know, you might not even think are real. The first time I saw a Northern Lights photograph in some magazine when I was in high school, I was thinking, is that even real? I had never seen it before, even in a photograph. I was blown away. Okay, so after I stamp that cloud out, I've done this many times, and I have a video of how to do this too. But one of the things I'm doing is I'm just using this as my kind of template here, okay? And you get ever-changing templates when you kind of make them yourself like this. I do love the plastic templates and how that looks too. It's a super stylized look. This to me is I don't know, it's a different look. Sometimes it can look more realistic because it's kind of an ever-changing type. And so what you do is you can move this around too. Don't move it around as much as I'm doing right now, but see, I'm just kind of combining different parts of this. I can build up like this, okay? You don't always have to stay stationary, okay? But after you get kind of that edge right there, what you do is clouds are continuous. They're not just an edge. So what you do is you bring more ink and you blend it down. Don't worry about kind of going over the edge too. You can go over the edge and have kind of more of a glowing type of top portion, okay? And you can do clouds in different ways. You can go like this, and you can have it circle around something. It can be from the bottom up or whatever, like that, okay? And then, see, like this, if there's some, too sharp of an edge, I can just kind of add some down here like this. And then, now, if anyone tries this and they say, oh, I tried it and it was hard, what they did was, it's always the same condition. They go like this, okay? They spend a few seconds on it, okay? And they go like that, and they say, oh my god, it didn't look like his, okay? But you have to work it a little bit more and to work your transitions. So in no point in time have I seen someone's piece that has gone astray. So this is a good thing, though. It means that you just add more. It's not that you added something and it went wrong. You just add enough. So the ones that I see they're just not developed enough. See, like this, I'm adding a second little billow without this, okay? So see this down here? Let's build on this, and you just go like this, and you can blot it like that. Now, see, that's going to be another kind of billowing area, and then you can kind of fill this out. So now, see, this cloud right here is a little bit more dimensional because it has this undulating thing. It's thinking in 3 dimensions, When we're doing more of a straight template, it's more of a flat look, which is, again, it's pretty cool, and it's in a stylized look. But doing something like this, it's just better to think kind of more 3-dimensionally, because it's not only easier to apply, like this, because it allows for variation and irregularity and non-uniform looks in terms of the application process, okay? It takes, any kind of preconceived notion of a specific... I wouldn't look at a cloud, and say, okay, I'm going to try to get exactly that. I would go nuts when, using a cotton ball in this to try and achieve those exact things. Maybe some of you can do that, but I think it would just require a lot more work. Okay, so see this adding down, and when this starts to dry, it starts to dry a little bit darker too, you know, when we're applying things this way. So just keep that in mind. It might change and alter as you go, meaning if it was light and you wanted to keep it light, then just add more, okay? But see, those look, you know, those look pretty natural to me, you know, and it's kind of fun to do. Okay, now I can add more, but let's just kind of move on because this is more about composition. So here we have our foundation, right? And we've made it ourselves, and you can totally customize. You can do like little, here, you can do like little things like kind of like wisps coming off of the clouds like this, you know? Isn't that fun too? Can you see that right there? Doesn't it look like the wind or something like that, like you would see? I know you might only see it from like an airplane or something like that, but it's kind of cool to do. All right, fun stuff. Now let's go with the Brilliance Black on some imagery in here, okay? I've tried Claire on here and it just didn't dry. I thought it would on the Star Dreams, and then the Star Dream Gold is different than this. I don't know what the metallic kind of surface on, or chemistry. So some of the Star Dream iridescent papers work differently than other ones, okay? So that's just kind of within the same line. So you have to kind of experiment with your pieces. But one of the great equalizers that I'm seeing these days is just get a Brilliance pad, because that'll dry. Then you don't have to kind of speculate. I mean, you know, it's certainly good to experiment around, you know, try new things, or try different things that are in your thing. I don't know what a stays on would look like on here. It might work fantastic, you know. Okay, so here's our foreground. We had foundation and foreground here, okay? Let's do something with the foreground that's a little bit different here too. Let's stamp these trees in different values. So let's ink this up and blot it off pretty good, okay? And let's try to get a background tree in here that's lighter than foreground trees. I know it's all in the foreground, but it's like back a ways from, you know, the darker ones here, okay? All right, so that is that. And then you saw me use this leafless pine stamp on the previous scene. Let's get some of this going on here too, okay? I can feel my Brilliance Black getting a little bit dry, and my Brilliance pad is getting, re-inker's getting dry too, so I need to reorder some of that. Okay, so see that right there? Foundation and foreground right there. Yeah, you can put, you know how I have those little stars up there? You can put little stars up there too if you want to. Or you can leave this open up here for a quote stamp. If you're going to put a quote stamp in here, what you might want to do is you might want to block a little bit more of that off with additional white ink or something like that, so that if you stamp it out in black, it would stand out a little bit more in here. Or you can stamp some birds up here, something of that sort, for your focal point. Let's leave this open right here and kind of a little bit more general so that I can decide what I want to do with it later when I'm going to use all these pieces that I'm doing right here. I'll finish them off with like some shadow work and highlighting and whatnot, and format them in cards. All right, that dries pretty fast. Okay, let's do something here. Let's go with a piece of gold foil. I haven't worked on gold foil for a while, but what a potentially festive looking surface to stamp on, and I'll show you some of the things that you can do with it. I haven't used my gold ink in quite some time, so let me grab my gold. If if I can find it here. Oh my gosh, I thought it was going to be the bottom pad of mine. Starlight Silver, Platinum Planet. Where's my gold pad? Oh my gosh. Pausing video. Okay, I found my pad. I forgot I put a bunch of pads on the floor because I had such a high stack of, these types of pads like this that when I was stamping, it was, I had this tower of pads kind of shaking around. It was rattling. It was driving me nuts. Okay, so we have our Galaxy Gold, Moonlight White, Graphite Black. Now, one of the things that I've come to do a couple times, I haven't done a lot, was playing around with the gold on here and stamping images out in gold. So it's basically gold and white. So we need to do a little bit of block out. I hope my Galaxy Gold is moist. I haven't used that for a while. Let's do a cabinet piece in here really quickly, okay? Let's see, let's just go like this. Okay, so my cabin's going to be roughly in this area, okay? I want the rooftop to be fairly light, so it's going to look like that, okay? And then we'll make some area down here light as well, okay? Down on the surface, okay? We'll try to make this go quickly, which this process of this type of foil usage is very quick, okay? But using this gold foil, if you stamp anything on here, practically, it makes it into kind of a festive, holiday-looking theme. Maybe not if it's, it might not look like Christmassy if it's like something like, a mummy or something like that, but I don't know. Oh, one of the things with gold foil like this, if you keep the heat on there too long, it starts to do that rainbow effect, which you can use strategically. You can kind of get more of that kind of rainbowy looking kind of effect in the sky. But the metallic surface does change the colors. And I find it the most with the gold. I don't know if it's so much with the silver, but certainly with the gold. Okay, now let's test this image out in Galaxy Gold. Let's see if it works out or not, okay? I haven't done this for a while, so... And now I could do it in black. That's really cool, too, but I just haven't done it in the gold for a while, so I want to test that out. So this certainly has some black on it, so I'm going to clean this off a little bit before I do this. Okay, I think I got most of the black off. And now, like I said, hopefully this is moist enough to where I can do this without pausing the video. Yeah, I don't know. This looks like really dried out. The Brilliance inks are, are designed to be, to dry very quickly. So it can also dry in the pad very quickly, or relatively speaking. Okay. Well, maybe I don't know. I think that'll stamp out. Okay, now like I said, this isn't going to be, I'm stamping gold on gold, so I don't know if it's going to stamp out super visible. But again, it has that kind of, it's going for that kind of different look here, so let's test it out. I'm going to leave some room up in the sky for maybe a quote stamp. Okay, but these can come together pretty fast. It's just a matter of getting that kind of white ink kind of blotted down first. But if you're kind of working in a assembly line fashion, let's say you want to do 10, 15 cards, if you're doing that, get a re-inker for your Brilliance pad for sure. But okay, now that one stamped out really light on top of that. Okay, let's do it in black. Okay. Sometimes you have to go for a little more solid imagery. I haven't done this in quite some time, but let's do that in black. Let's do multi-tones on here, I think. Let's try this out. That barely showed up. It was almost no contrast there. I guess it was gold on white. I need to see what I did with that before, because that's what I was doing. I wasn't using black. Okay, I'm not using a stamp positioner, and I don't think I need to because it barely showed up anyway. So you just go right on top of that. Maybe I should have heat set that though first because now I'm stamping wet into wet. But let's see if this works, you know. Okay. Holding it down a little bit longer, letting that ink to transfer. If I'm stamping it right on top of that dry white, fine. If you're stamping it right on top of wet gold, if you pull it off, it might create that kind of suction effect where it didn't transfer over there, okay? All right, so that being said, let's see what we can get here. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right. So don't stamp gold, stamp black. That was, I did that on purpose. I'm just joking. Well, like I said, if it doesn't show up, then, you know, no sweat. Just do it in, you know, do it in black. Okay, so that being said, foundation. Your foundation is, yeah, it's kind of the white too. Not really. That's more of a block out. You know, it's not really playing an integral part. As far as the imagery goes, it is, this white down here is playing an integral part of um, the lighting scheme of the piece because that is much lighter down there than up top, right? Now you could have done the cloud things in the background too if you wanted to. You can kind of combine some clouds and an area of light down below. Okay, so here's some filler stamps. Let's just go with that tree cluster again. Okay, and we'll fill out around here. Okay, so there's some trees off to the side. They don't show up as much though because I didn't block out with white behind it, okay? But then let's put in our filler texture down here, okay? The sedge filler stamp. Okay. If you've watched the previous video, I used this quite a bit in that video. It's my kind of go-to textural stamp for kind of ground terrains, unless it's like a snowy type of terrain or something of that sort, okay? So we get that in there like so, all right? And then, let's do something here. Let's stamp out these reed stamps in gold, but also to do them in black. Let's see if we can get some multicolored tone impressions. That being said, you know, when I'm stamping my other scenes out in my previous video, I didn't really stamp out multiple tones of like reeds in the foreground, like greens and blacks or something like that. I just kept it one tone because, you know, I just wanted to simplify things. I don't want to throw too many different types of changes into the mix, okay? But that being said, you know, we're kind of working with some kind of variations here. Okay, now that was some reeds in gold. It's really hard to see it, but see, it is reflective in gold like that, okay? And that's what kind of playing around with metallics is really fun to do. Now that's very, you know, it's not visible, not apparent, but what we do is we're kind of doing this. We have gold as a surface, then you have white over the top of it, okay? And then what I've done is I placed that gold on top of it again in image form. And then what you can do is you can come into it again. Now, I'm not trying to stamp over my reeds exactly, you know, to eradicate them. I'll use this in a little bit of a different, I move that a little bit. Watch out when you go like wet into wet right here, it really slides around, okay? But see, as I'm putting in some additional impressions of black over the top of that gold, so I get this multi-toned imagery. I have a little bit of ink right here on my fingers. I picked up gold from something. But this does not dry on here quickly, so you just kind of wipe it right off, and you're fine. Okay? Alright, so there's that. But let's see if we can see some of that gold and black. There's reeds in the foreground. It's subtle. Do you see that right in there? See where that gold, those gold reeds are behind the black? It's something that people want. Now, you can see it down here especially. Okay? but it's a little bit more subtle. But those are those types of things that kind of are really fun to play around with. You know, it looks different in here than if I just stamp the black. It would look fine, but I just think it looks even better with that, okay? All right, now, that was my foreground. Now, let's go into, you know, our focal point or something of that, okay? Now, you can say that the, you know, the cabin is certainly a focal landing point, but let's see here. Oh, let's go with, I don't know. I'm not going to take too much time to pick out a quote stamp to go with this perfectly. I'm just going to go with a picture is a poem worth 1,000 words here. Oh, Confucius said it. Okay, this is from the Scenic Sentiments sheets. Okay. Oh, one of the things, you know, how I layered gold and black for the foreground. You can layer gold and white, black and white in here. I'd usually use the black probably, but okay, let's stamp this right here. Okay, thick pigment ink on a very slick, non-porous paper. Just watch out that you don't smear it. If it does smear, what you do is you just wipe it right off and just restamp it again. You can do that as many times as you want. Because, you know, when I heat set this, up until the time I heat set, it's pretty wet. Now, if I can let, you know, I can allow this to dry for a day or two, and it's going to dry inherently, you know. But sometimes you can still wipe it off a little bit. That being said, when you're working on foils, what we'll do is we'll spray seal these. You know, we're spray mounting the vellum, but then we're spray sealing the foils, okay, with the inks on them. Okay, so that's a little bit of a focal point. You know, people go right to the word stamp. You know, they might nose the cabin first, but then they'll read the cabin. And this piece in here really is in need of some additional foreground, I would say, because the sky is kind of boring up here. So let's do something. You know, I was talking about how, you know, I could have stamped out these leaves, or these reeds down here in white and black. Let's do something like that. Let's try white on the overhanging leaves right here. Okay, so some additional foreground. Foreground doesn't always have to be dark, okay? You can play around with it. Like if I'm doing a fall scene with a lot of leaves in color, we can color these whatever, you know, types of leaves we want to do. If we're doing aspen, maybe they're yellows or something like that. Maybe maples, maybe they're oranges and reds or something real dynamic like that, okay? Okay, so thick ink, be careful about your impressions, okay? Like this. Now that really stands out, so I'm going to layer some black ink impressions over the top of this too, okay? But look at that white on top of there. Maybe I stamped out my imagery in white or something like that. That's it kind of stood out. Okay, I'm going to come across some of these trees here on the side too. I should have blocked out, you know, because those ones are kind of invisible. So what I'll do is I'll just bring some overhanging branches down into here too, like that. Okay. Okay, now that's I'm tempted to just go in right with black over the top of that, but let's heat set this. Okay, so we have foreground on the base, foreground up top here. You can even do white over the top of the black down here, probably. And then you can do another layer of black. I don't know. It's endless. The possibilities are endless, I should say. Okay, let's go back to the brilliance right here. Boy, that white looks really good on there. White on gold. I guess maybe that's why I was doing it so much. I haven't done that in a while, but maybe it's time to stamp a few lessons in gold using, I don't know, some of the other techniques that I'm kind of curious to know what vellum would look like up, mounted on top of gold. All right, here comes some of the black. I'm not going to try and stamp over all my white. I just want this to kind of be interspersed in here as another layer, okay, of texture. Okay, something like that. Now that white's still really bold, but can you see where it came in here? It kind of blends in a little bit more that way. Okay. All right, I can't resist here. These, they're not finished off, but I want to see what this looks like here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with my white. See, there's a lot of white up here, of course, with the white impressions of the... But I like to go in with my white paint pen and to add little highlights down here in the meadow, or maybe they're wildflowers or something like that, okay? I like to cluster them a little bit like this, okay? To kind of spread out that lighting within the scene. You can put some on top of our trees. Over here, the white didn't cover the black too well, so I can put some highlights on my leaves like so. Okay, like I said, I won't do too much of this, but I wanted to see what it looked like because I haven't done this in a while. People are saying, do that on your own time, stay with the theme. I hear you. So I'll do it quickly. Okay, so here's a little bit of a kind of shimmering highlights down here. And I would build on that, but you can see kind of what it's doing. It's kind of relating to the overall. I have some up in my trees like this. Foundation, filler, okay, foreground, foreground, focal point, right? But just on foil. Look how dynamic that is. It's pretty simple too, in terms of an application process. We're not coloring with a bunch of different colored pencils, which I love to do, okay? Don't get me wrong, I love all these different types of processes, but when you have kind of a surface that's already inherently dynamic like that, kind of just, your use of your applications of media and finishing of your compositions is a lot faster because you don't have to do too much because it's already very dynamic. In this case, you have kind of the the interplay of reflected light, so extreme like that. Okay. All right. So let's see. We have a piece of very reflective holographic foil. Let's do something on this real quick. Okay. I don't want this this video to get like extremely long or anything like that. Some people are saying it's already long. But let's do something here, okay? Let's play around with, I really like to play around with lighting. Lights and everything, but on the holographic foil, it's just so kind of funky and dynamic. I really like playing around with that aspect of it. And I think I'm still just scratching the surface on how to do certain things with that. Okay, let me show you something really fast, okay? As fast as this one can possibly be, but... Okay, so this piece in here is going to be kind of light beams going through some trees, okay? If you can kind of imagine that, like they call them crepuscular rays. You see them coming down out of the clouds, or if you're walking amongst some trees when it's fairly... there's moisture in the air, or dust in the air, or something like that, and you see some light beams coming through it. That's what we're going to do here, okay? So you've seen me block out with white, okay? Let's block out with both white and black, okay? So the black is going to give me somewhat of a vignette, a framing of my piece here. Let me grab a cotton ball. Okay. These are called cotton balls, right? 100% cotton. That's important. Now, if some of this is, if this use of cotton balls is just too basic for you, you need to buy, applicators specifically designed for that. You can call these blending clouds, okay? I was joking around with someone, with a bunch of people online. I said, some company is going to start packaging these up and calling them blending clouds, you know. I hope not, but I've seen that happen with other types of tools in the past. It's been around, something's been around, and like for makeup or something like that, and someone starts packaging it and marks it up a huge amount, and they call it something else. And it's like the latest kind of tools or something to be used. Okay, so this is just adding in a vignette around my piece. I'm going to go a little bit lighter over here because I'm going to have some light coming from this direction. I don't know, maybe I'll wipe that off. Okay, now here's the difference between this type of brilliance ink and like a StazOn or something like that, okay? StazOn is really great for impressions, okay? But StazOn, you can't add ink like this and blend it around like this because it's still moist, okay? You can still wipe it off if you want to, like that, okay? So that's what's good about this, but you've seen me doing it. It'll heat set in a few seconds, okay? So that's a really good quality to kind of a real malleable ink that has kind of an extended range of abilities, okay? We can't do this, or like with the white, with other types of inks. And I'm really, in some ways, I'm trying to promote them. I don't have any relationship to them all, but I just want people, if you're going to get some of that ink, you better get it, I don't know, at some point in time. I would say quickly, but I did contact them. They said, no, they're not, discontinuing it. But a lot of people had these 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago. I don't know. A lot of people have it in their stash, but they just never used it so. And I've come to realize that a lot of people have never even heard of it, because it's been, there's other inks that have come out. But it's still the only ink that does certain things, okay? So, a pad and a re-inker or two is a pretty good idea for, I don't know, opening up the doors for different types of applications of media on unconventional stamping services, such as this rainbow holographic. Okay, so the rainbow holographic, it's really cool, but it's really a very dynamic and loud piece. So what I like to do is I like to subdue it a little bit, okay? See, it's still really dynamic in there. See, over here in the black, you can still see all that color shining through it. And in the white, you can still see it shining through in here. But it's just not so extreme, okay? Extreme is not bad, but it'll, if we don't do something to some of it, it'll really compete for, and maybe, anything that you stamp over it is just completely, secondary in terms of the surface, okay? All right, so I've blocked out this whole area right here, and a little bit of a vignette right in here, okay? That's a little bit of planning, okay? We're going to dry it with this. Okay, that does curl like that. Certain foils really curl on you. You can try heat setting the back of it, heat setting the front, but what I do is I just counterbend after, and it's largely okay. And then plus when I end up using these, I usually end up mounting them anyway on another piece of paper, or, to frame it off for card format. So it doesn't really matter to me. Okay, so let's go with some trees in here. I'll go for a couple different types maybe. Let's go for our Brilliance Black again. Okay. And then we'll heat set then. We'll have some light beams running through it. It'll give you a different foreground, okay? So the light beams will be, I don't know, the light beams are going to be background and foreground, but they're going to play a very integral role in terms of the subject matter. It's kind of the focal point too, okay? All right, so some trees like so. I have them kind of going off the bottom of the page down here too. I think my pad is getting a little bit dry. When you use your pigment inks to stamp your imagery, you're using a lot of ink, so you go through a lot of ink, or you go through inks a lot faster than a lot of other styles of stamping, just because it is so thick in viscosity, okay? Oh, here's the thing that you're going to run into too, like I just did. Your heat setting and stuff like that. See, I didn't stamp out some of this right down here. Scenic stamping, you just come back in and restamp right in there, and it doesn't matter, okay? I mean, you saw me stamp, a whole cabin over the top of, another cabin that didn't stamp out. You can do that type of thing in scenic stamping, okay? Now, if I just put my stamp there and I accidentally, rotate it around, there's a big smear in there, that's a little bit harder to work around, but scenic stamping is a lot more kind of user-friendly than you might think. If you don't like a whole area of a scene, then you stamp a branch over it or something like that. Um, Scenic stamping, because, photographs, they use, you know, you might be taking a photograph of a larger whole or something like that. I'm talking about larger, WHOLE, not HOLE, whole. You can crop it, you can cut it out, and make the scene smaller if you don't like an entire, area, or if you've kind of, dropped a stamp or something like that. It's not any big deal. It just, you just provide surgery and amputate that part that you don't want. Okay, let's go for a couple different types of trees in here. I'm going to have some light beams running in here, so I want to have a couple different thicknesses of trees, because you'll be able to see the light beams running through there a little bit easier, okay? And yeah, my pad's getting a little bit dry. Okay, like that. And I wonder if I can get a lighter impression of a tree in the background. I smudged that one a little bit. Let's just go with this right here, okay? Okay. So let's heat set this now. Okay, now you have to get this one pretty dry, because we're going to be running white pigment ink right across the front of some of these trees in here, okay? Alright. So there's other things you could have done, we could have had, sometimes I have like a sun or something like that stamped in there, casting the beams in here. Alright, so let's go. Let's see, I can use this piece of paper right here. Let me grab a couple of these pieces of paper that I... Oops, not that one. I need a little bit of better tear here. Okay, this is your easiest template you'll ever make in your life. Okay, so kind of choose kind of an area out here to run some beams through. Okay, I'm going to go right about right here. Okay, I'm going to have the beams of light coming from the edge of my paper, so I'll just roughly put a little bit of a dot right there, which is going to be my vanishing point. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is every time I make a light beam, I'm going to have it coming from that little vanishing point right there. Okay, so how does this come into, how does this apply to composition? Okay, this is an example of doing kind of a foreground image. Okay, it's a foreground element. Okay, because these beams are going to be coming in front of these trees. Okay. You can call these trees kind of the foundation in this case. Sometimes they're foreground right now. But if you put something in front of the trees, then it pushes them back. Now they're no longer, you know, as much of the foreground as they used to be, okay? So what we'll do is I have my little dot up there, and okay, now light beams can go in front of things and they can go in back of things. I'm going to do both, okay? So I'm going to have this light kind of coming in here like this. Now, if when it's going in back of a tree, I'm not masking off a tree or something and taking the time to do that, okay? I'm not doing that much work, okay? So what I can see, I can just generally see where that tree is there, and there's a little bit of space in between there, like that. But see, I'll just come in between the branches, or behind the branches of the spruce tree, and I'll come in front of the trees of the pines and rocks stamp, okay? And I do it a little bit irregular. I'll have a little bit more ink here and less down here, or something like that. So I like it varied. I just think it's kind of more natural that way. When you add in one light beam, it's going to look really strange because it doesn't match anything. It's just this beam right here. But you'll add in more accordingly, okay, as you work it, okay? So, and what you do is with your additional beams, you kind of vary the width of it, and you can vary the strength of it as well. On this beam right here, we won't be able to see too much of it. White shows up against darkness, so it's only going to be showing up over these trees, so this beam right here is just kind of going across these tree tips right here, or trees, parts of trees, the trunk, whatever, like that. And now we have this beam running across that. You see it coming down here? Now, the ones in here, where they're against some darker trees, that's going to be more apparent that way too, okay? So you just kind of, you just adjust accordingly. And you're saying, well, hey, how much do we know to do? It's all up to you, is the thing. Here, watch, I'm just making this decision now. Okay, this beam is going behind this tree right over here. So I'm doing it behind it. It's going in front of this tree, and maybe behind this one, okay? There's a little bit of a tip of it right there. And I'll have it going in front of the thicker spruce tree over here. Okay. And maybe I'll have it come behind this one. So you see what I mean? So I'm kind of oscillating the coverage of it like this. I'll show you where that is, okay? So let's see if you can see this light beam right here. Back, front, back, front, back, okay? Because it's just, you just choose whatever you want, okay? Now, if you want it to go a little bit lighter, this one looks like it can use a little bit more, going in front of this spruce tree, so you can just kind of build up additional ink over the top of it, okay? Or you can allow it to dry a little bit more, then come into there. Okay, but okay, now what these beams are doing is, now these beams are a little bit more of your foreground in here. So see, we're doing a foreground element, not foreground imagery, okay? Okay, now this beam right here, let's do this. Speaking of foreground, let's just put this. Let's really build up a pretty good thick amount over our imagers in here. Here's the thing, too, you can do. As it hits certain things, you can put down a lot of it in front of the spruce tree, and then it just kind of dissipates, okay? So you have more of it on one side of the tree, and then it just kind of peters out like this. So I'm using less ink over here and more over here, okay? Don't think about that in terms of, oh my gosh, there's so much to think about. Think about it in terms of you can put it on very irregularly, and it might actually contribute to the overall effectiveness of it. See that? It's a little bit thicker over, and it just kind of disappears out here. So you don't have to do the whole thing like that, okay? And now let's put another beam over here. So this is like a cool foreground element. You could do foreground elements like, your reeds or something like that, and have, light beams in there too. So it could be beams and foreground reeds or something like that in the scene, okay? So you're just doing multiple things so that, this is, in some of the instances, this white pigment ink was used as the background, right? because it was used as clouds and I stamped everything over the front of it, on the startering paper, okay? So this is just stamping it over my images. Now it suddenly becomes the foreground right in here. Here this white pigment ink is in the background as background. Oh, by the way, you can do a hole punch right here and blot it off and, kind of stencil a moon up here, and then you have the moonlight. And then that moon really represents something like way back in the distance, okay? All right, but you see these beams in here going like that? See how that one kind of dissipates like that? It's like all in the front of it. But this beam right here goes in the back of this tree. So you've sandwiched the tree in between beams. It's really fun to do. I think I could use kind of a little bit of stronger beam here and there. Let's go with that. So you just kind of look at it, and then, you can make make an assessment if you want to go, with a stronger beam here and there, which means that you just apply more pigment ink there. So you have to kind of build it up sometimes. Like I said, it might dry a little bit more transparent, okay? So like this, see this beam right here is stronger than that beam. So you've added variation to your, doesn't it look more dimensional that way though, with weaker, stronger beams? Sometimes they're wider, so narrow, okay? So don't keep it so uniform, okay? And then, for something like this, let's go, I don't know, the beams will be hard to beat as a focal point, but anytime you stamp some kind of word stamp into a scene, it kind of becomes the focal point because people, it's just natural that you read something. Something says something, we tend to want to read it, right? Or let's say it's in a foreign language, and you can't read it, your eye would probably still be naturally drawn to that word. You would just be wondering, I wonder what it says. Okay, let's go with this one right here. Let's go with black, okay? So, those light beams, like I said, things are very, varied. Those light beams are certainly an attention getter, so you could call it a focal point. Light beams coming through or something like that certainly is attention getting, could be the focal point. This word stamp could be a focal point too. So you can have two focal points in there. Okay. I'll try to get this in here where it's visible. I'm going to stamp it in a little bit of the black, and I can't see through my really dirty stained tack and peel that's on my acrylic block here. I need to wash this off and really scrub off some of that dry ink. Here you got it right here. Nature always wears the colors of the spirit, okay? Well, it's really crooked. I couldn't see it all, okay? But that kind of becomes the focal point. Then you just kind of frame this up. What I would do is I would just cut that up there a little bit, to match that. But anyways, here you have foreground as light beams or something like this. But look at this kind of dynamic, rainbowy, background like that in the rainbow holographic paper. They sell it. It's a Recollections packet, Michaels, that has it. Very inexpensive, goes on sale all the time. I don't know if it does still. They're having, everyone's having sourcing problems right now, but it was as cheap as $3.33, I think, for a 25 letter-sized pack. It was insane, how cheap, some of our supplies are these days, okay? At times, you had to buy real specialty papers, and it cost a lot more. So some things, are still much cheaper. Okay, so anyway, that is an example of those Fs, okay? But you don't have to get locked into kind of this notion of it always being imagery right here, okay? Those light beams in here certainly can be a very strong focal point of the scene, okay? They could be foreground too, okay? Because they are coming from the background, and then they're coming out in the foreground. They're certainly closer to us than the trees now, okay? kind of white pigment ink applications of things as a foundation. So not just going with, okay, I'm stamping a cabin or something like that, or a lakeside cove or a river or waterfall, whatever it is. It could just be, some clouds in the background and some things in the foreground like that. And that makes for a complete scene. This would be really great for some kind of quote or something like that, or you can put a moon up there still. The rainbow, not the rainbow, the gold foil paper, okay? Cardstock, I don't know what it is. Um, Stamping in different colors. White, it certainly stands out against a darker background like that, okay? So things in the foregrounds, aren't always just black, but when you're stamping them on white cardstock, unless you darken this in with all kinds of different coloring, I could stamp out these trees in white over a toned blue background. Let's say if this is a midnight in the winter or something like that without much moonlight. You can certainly stamp out these kind of ice-covered trees in the foreground in white. Okay, so think about some different colors. And like I said, if I'm doing a fall color scene or something like that, maybe these are stamped out in red on your white cardstock, just based on maybe some of the tree colors. In the distance, you apply that same color in your foreground imagery, especially if it's overhanging leaves like that, okay? And let's see, like this. Here's your dark colored foil. You'll have to do some blocking out with the white pigment ink. The white pigment ink plays a much stronger role when it's being stamped out in imagery like this, or in use in clouds, used very strategically in terms of your light beams coming through like this. This is more of just kind of, a general addition down here. I don't think people are looking at this piece right here, and their attention's not going to go to, oh, look at that, there's white pigment ink kind of blocking out in the background, okay, making that tree visible. They're not thinking about any of that because it's not used that way. It's just kind of this general application in the background, and the attention's still on the imagery, in this case, probably the chapel right here or something of that sort, okay? But just one little thing to think about, you have to apply a pretty decent amount of it if you want, depending on what images you want to show up that you're going to stamp over the top of it with, okay? And let's see, what else did we do here? I've forgotten what I even stamped out. Okay, and the vellum here, okay? All of these images in black have been stamped on one side of the paper, and the cloud impressions are stamped on the back, okay? This would be kind of interesting too. Like I said, let's say we didn't stamp these clouds in here, and we spray mounted that onto like a photo or something like that. Or you can do a brayered background or something like that. If you wanted it more subdued, then the vellum would be a good way to go because it knocks down the intensity and the values of anything that you're mounting it on top of. Okay, I think the heat of my hand right here is making this curl. It's interesting. Always interesting with the vellum playing around with that. Okay. All right, so anyways, like I said, this one's not finished by any means. There's a lot of things to do on it. With some of these, though, I don't know, there's a little bit of things that we can do. We can bring in some highlights and whatnot in here. This one's certainly open for a lot of the different things that we can do. I could still bring a moon into this one, make it really light, and then I would adjust my areas in here accordingly, and I would push the light reflectiveness and going on in here. In fact, I think I might do that on this one. I'll draw like a North Star or something like that, or a moon in here, and I'll bring that same reflected light down in here with some more strategic applications of white pigment ink, okay? And that sounds like something that's really fun. But this would make for a really great Christmas card or something like that, just a winter card, and that would be really fun to do. Okay, so anyways, variations on your compositional builds, okay? Hopefully it didn't confuse and kind of opened up more of the possibilities for you in terms of kind of your approach, especially if you haven't done scenic stamping before and you want to kind of involve, two or three at least different kind of elements within your compositions to make them kind of a fuller, um, I don't know, kind of expression of nature of what can potentially go on in there, meaning things in the distance, things in the foreground, and as far as kind of compositional continuity and whatnot going on in there. Alright, so anyways, thanks for watching the video. I didn't get around to the green one. You know, this video is getting long enough. But I will do some more, what I call stamp sketches and whatnot in the future, and I'll kind of point out the different aspects that I'm currently working on at the time, whether it's kind of foundation, filler, foreground, or focal point, or what. And we'll also get into some of the different surfaces that we've done here, and we'll also finish off in future videos, compositionally related. We'll finish these off, and I'll show you how to increase things like your lighting direction and, I don't know, light source, reflected light, dialogue going on within these pieces to kind of take your pieces from this, which I think is a beginner, type of process right here, and with really some minor and easy tweaks, you can really make them look really full, dynamic, and really advanced looking with minimal types of processes. Okay, so thanks again for watching.